Are they on now? Yes, they are.
Sounds like it.
Okay. All right, so do we want to start with the law enforcement center?
Yes,
Okay,
Justin's here.
okay.
Here. I think the presentation will come up here in a moment. All right. Well, good morning, everybody. I'm Justin Moninga with ICS. We're going to go through a board update and specifically go through the phasing and scheduling. Kind of a complicated project here, so I thought we'd really explain what we're planning on doing right now. So the agenda, a quick review of the design status, our bidding strategy and our bid schedule, our schedule and phasing plan, site logistics, and open up for some Q&A at the end. So the design status, BKV Group, they completed the design. The construction documents are in our possession. We've done the construction document estimating, so that's been completed. And we have preliminary completion of the schedule and phasing plan. It's a complicated project for phasing, and we have to be able to adapt throughout the project, but we feel pretty good that we have a overall, overall process or overall plan. And the project's ready to go for bid. Actually, it was out for bid yesterday. Here's a floor plan view of the garage and Sallyport. The smaller buildings of Sallyport, the larger buildings of the garage. It's kind of small, not going to go in detail on the plan. Next page is the booking area and the pre-booking area in the cells 1 through 4 housing unit. That's where the current Sallyport's at right now. That's going to be renovated into that. The next page.
I had a question. What are those dots for? I was looking at trying to figure out
Specifically what dots?
the colored, or they're squares. Do you see the colored squares?
Those are, I'm guessing those are linking to detail in the plan?
Oh, yes.
Oh, okay.
Yep. Yeah. It'll show like a wall cut through of what that
Okay.
wall's made out of.
All right.
Then the next page is the housing units, starting from left to right. We're expanding the day rooms, new finishes, new workstations, window tint on the existing glazing on the right side. Putting new flooring in the bathrooms or in the shower areas. On the right side housing units, we are putting new security guardrails up the stairs. Here's a law enforcement center addition on the right. So lobby, I know there's a breakout area or training area. Renovations of the offices and new finishes in that training room on the left. Elevation views, so the top one's the north elevation, so if you're on 2nd Street looking south, it'll look like that. And on the bottom one, if you're looking to the north, it would be that. So if you're kind of from this parking lot on the south side, you'd be able to, around from 3rd Street looking up, you'd see that. And the west elevation, you can see the transom windows up a little higher, a little bit of natural light in that building. So if you're looking to the east, you'd see that. Here's the elevation view of the law enforcement center. So bidding strategy and work scopes. So we've went round and round with this one for quite a while. We've identified 12 work scopes or prime contractors, starting with earthwork, utilities, and site concrete. That's pretty much your excavator and everything outside the building footprint. Precast, that's your wall panels at the addition, like the garage addition. Structural place concrete, that's your foundations or everything all concrete within the building footprint. Masonry, your concrete masonry units, brick, everything. There's quite a bit of masonry on this project. Structural steel, that's your bar joists and decking, columns, beams, roofing. And then general construction is a pretty appealing work scope for a general contractor. That was our big goal, to make sure we get participation at bid day. So selective demo, woods and plastics, really everything like a general contractor would be good at is what's within that work scope. Aluminum doors, windows and glazing, acoustical ceilings and security ceilings as well. Fire suppression, mechanical and electrical. So that's where we're at for that. So bidding strategy or the actual bid schedule, like I mentioned, the project's out for bid. We are planning to open bids December 12th. And, December 12th will come quick. Seems a long ways away, but it'll be here before you know it. We do have a pre-bid walkthrough on later this month, the 21st as well, which is a tour for all interested contractors.
And then the important part about the bid opening on the 12th is that the bids would be approved by the board on the 17th. Is that correct?
Yes, yep. Phasing plan, this is kind of busy here. When I PDF'd it, I don't know where some of those lines came from, so I do apologize. And I can't quite read read my writing there.
Reese, do you want to get down the lower right?
Yeah, actually that bottom right, there we go. So we're starting with the garage and Sally Port. Soon as road restrictions are up, the intent is to start the new construction. So right around that May 19th, and that'll go through April 1st. There will be site work later in the year, as soon as the frost is out in 26. Lobby, records, and sheriffs. That's the law enforcement center on the right. That's going to be broken up into 3 phases. So starting May 19th through September 16th, that area in blue below that red line, that red left to right line, that'll be going first. And then going into phase 2, that small area will go from September to January 1st. And then going into office renovations, that's kind of the gray stuff. It's actually 4 phases, not 3. Office renovations from January 13th to March 4th. And then that last phase, kind of in that turquoise area, is March 13th through April 1st. So the intent is there. We understand it has to be occupied and usable the whole time, and that's why it's phased the way it is. Going into the housing units and booking, the cells 1 through 4, that pink area, all the way into 1A, that whole area will be actually the first area, one of the first areas of construction. And that's going from June 27th through October 27th. Then we're bouncing over to the other side of that first housing unit. It's more, not real evasive there, it's more finishes and window film, but that's going from November 28th through December 22nd. Then we're bouncing down to that green area for booking renovation. Yeah, go ahead, Dave.
So how do we handle the inmates?
Yeah, oh yeah, I'll show you that. I'll show you, actually, if you pull that down a little bit. So right off the bat, what we're doing, we're putting a temporary Sally Port in on the north side. And that blue line shows the route of traffic for inmates. And when we're in construction, those certain areas will be shut down, but we'll be able to at least utilize that Sally Port during the jail construction. Yeah, we've had a lot of conversation about that.
Yeah, so they'll be in there quite a while.
Yeah, yep. But you can see we're taking down basically what we have now for housing units, a quarter. To try to minimize the impact. Yep. Of course, when we're done, we'll have more, so it'll be good.
Yeah.
Booking area is the next area in green. Jeff, if you could scroll down just a little bit so you can see the dates again. Then, booking area goes from December 26th through March 12th. Then we're back up to the housing units again in green. That'll be April 10th through June 18th. And then the last one will be June 19th through August 27th. It's kind of busy. You got to really look at it to kind of wrap your head around it, but I think it's a good plan. So then going in the government center, this is actually our first area of construction. Soon as we get plan review comments back or plan review complete by the state, we want to get going on this. So the intent is right away in March 17th to get going on level 2, right below us, to renovate all that area in red. And moving down, once that's complete, we'll go into the level 1, and this is a 3-phase project as well to keep office space for the personnel. And starting in red, that is, if you could go a little bit, pull it over to the left a little bit, and see the dates. Perfect. So phase 1A is that area in red, June 3rd through July 3rd. Then bouncing into green, July 11th to August 27th. And that last phase will be weekend work. It's just corridors, flooring, and ceilings. And that'll be done 2 weekends to wrap that up. Again, the intent is to minimize the impact and still have usable space.
We have what, a bi-weekly meeting starting on, we had our first one, and our next one is November 21st. And then we're gonna meet every other week thereon to kind of carry this through. We've also had meetings with the staff, and we're starting to think about relocation plans and temporary assignments and where we're gonna temporary office, and we'll share updates with you as we get a little further along with that.
And this next page here is the actual schedule. Does a little nicer job explaining how it goes. Starting with level 2 renovation. I said that's the first area of construction. Starting in March, level 1 broken out in 3 phases. Starting in June, wrapping up or mid-September. That garage sally port starting in May when road restrictions are up. Lobby records and sheriffs. That's broken out in 4 phases. The additions in 2, an office renovation in another 2, but starting in June 2nd and wrapping up through spring site work, June of 26. The housing units and booking starting late June and wrapping up September of 2026. So kind of gives a good visual of how the project's getting laid out. And the last slide is site logistics. This is just a big picture view of how we plan on tackling the project. In red, where the future addition is going to be, you can see our construction fencing. It shows where our job trailer will be. We identify some laydown area for equipment and material on the north side of 2nd Street there. And those areas in green are some potential contractor parking areas. So with that, if you have any wondering if you have any questions.
That material laydown areas, that's gonna be right in the street then?
We're gonna fence around. No, it's not in the street. You can see it's green area right now.
The laydown is the red area
Yeah.
above that. The green areas are identifying parking, so be parking in the,
Okay.
contractor parking in the street.
Are those privately owned properties?
No, that's county land there.
Right there, okay.
Yep.
That's a tax forfeited parcel.
Oh, okay, sure. What about that other one that looks like it's in the road, or the contract parking? Any issues with the city on that?
We'll have to coordinate with the city for sure. Yeah.
It's on street parking, but we'll share this plan with them.
Yeah, okay. Interesting.
So I was just at the beginning of the meeting that when you guys met because of the law library, and so at that time you were trying to figure out if you should start on the 2nd floor or 1st floor. So I'm assuming the staff thought the least amount of disruption for the busy building season was to start with the 2nd floor?
Justin and his team identified the 2nd floor as being the first place. If we have some material delays,
Okay,
if we can get that space done, then that gives us even more flexibility when we go down to the 1st floor relative to the attorney's office.
okay,
So I think that was the final decision-making to say,
Yeah.
let's start on,
Okay.
as much as they wanted to start on 1st floor, they got to the point of saying, well, it makes more sense right here.
okay.
Because of the displacement of the attorney's office staff being really time-sensitive and needing them to have a place to go.
Okay,
And as I met internally with 2nd floor staff last week, it makes a lot more sense for their schedule to go first, primarily Eric's office, to be done as soon as possible. Property records has a lot more flexibility than the others. So generally, I'll say, our intention is to take that office space downstairs and move environmental services into there and probably back into the law library. We'll be able to accommodate most of Eric's staff between those 2 rooms. We're gonna create a lab in the 3rd floor conference room for property records. And they'll have a lot more people rotating, working remotely and then working
Okay.
sometime in here. And then we may identify 1 or more spaces for that, but I think we can get all of environmental services in temporary locations on the 1st floor. And we can get probably half of property records in a space, in this building, so that they'll have the ability to interact with the public. Generally.
Yeah.
Yeah, fun for staff too, who stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not insignificant, because you think, well, when we go, just for example, when we go here and we look, everything in red during the time frame that's under construction, nobody can go in there except the contractors, right?
Yeah.
So everything has to be moved. Eric's plants all have to be someplace else, right? People's desks and the stuff that they need to have access to, they need to put it someplace where they can get to it or bring it with them or put it in temporary storage. And I've already, I've suggested people have thoughts about, what do I need to bring with me? And what do I need to have access to? And what can just go in storage? Because this conference room is not going to be touched, which means if something can just be stored until until 12 weeks when we need it back, we can use that space, for example. It might not be the best option, but it is an option. And then the same thing will happen down here. But see, when we do these spaces first, we're not really interfering with anybody. We're making room for the
Right.
administrative
Yep.
staff, for the attorney's office to have space to work.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's gonna be a challenge, but there's no way it was never gonna be a challenge, so.
Well, fortunately, it's not extending out many, many months,
Right, yeah.
so that'll be helpful.
Yeah, yeah, and hopefully plan review gets done early. We might even be in a little bit earlier than
Yeah.
that, but that March 17th was an estimate based on the state's turnaround time for the plan review. So those could increment up or back depending on the state's responsiveness. We are, also, with the moving of the power lines out here, we're gonna have to do a cutover. You're aware of this, aren't you?
Yep, you mentioned that to me.
That
yeah.
on next Thursday night, Minnesota Power is gonna do the cutover to the new power lines and abandon the overhead power lines, as I understand it. And I authorized them to work overnight to do it, so that we don't have to shut the courthouse down for a day. They're talking about a 4 to 6 hour outage. So I've got Fred and his staff knowing they're gonna have to be in that Friday morning to make sure the routers come on, and Bobby's gonna be working to make sure that the door access, all those systems that when the power goes out, sometimes you have to go in and kind of encourage them to start up again. So we'll have that plan. I also shared that schedule with Angel at the city, so they've got first notice that there's gonna be that outage here, but we may have to have a conversation with them too, a little bit about the scope of that. But they know the Minnesota Power staff that we're working with, and their public works staff know, what's his name? Jesse Harvala was the contact from Minnesota Power that Bobby and I were talking about, and I know that their public works people know them too, so they'll coordinate all of that. It's gonna affect more than just our block, so they'll have to provide notice to people. The good news is, once that's done, it's done.
It's out of the way. Yeah, I'm glad we're getting it done this year as opposed to trying to wait next spring. Because think about, Jeff, we started this and talking about it in June. We're finally doing it now. So it's a long process.
So when you go down to the first floor, and so K's will eventually move down there?
Yep.
So do we have plans for this office back here?
Right now, we're gonna leave that as the
For elections?
elections,
Okay,
storage, equipment, workspace. We really haven't identified a better spot than that.
and it's secure, so
It's
that's
secure.
important.
We are considering that one-off room
Mhm.
that's in between. We may turn that into a bigger wellness room for this facility,
Oh,
and then back them off into the rest of that space. Gina asked if we could investigate that option, and
okay,
I think we can in that one, just by changing some key cylinders.
okay.
So, I've already asked Kay to think about, when she's putting the election stuff away, not put it in that room. And we'll see if we can coordinate that in the next few months. I'm also working with Bobby on, He's got a quote to redo the plumbing in the downstairs break room. The drains don't work or work very slowly. And he's got a plumbing report on that. And independently, I'll be working on getting a contractor to come in and renovate that space.
And do we have money in the budget to redo what would need to be done?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we can do it under our regular capital improvement.
Yes,
We're,
okay.
we're talking tens of thousands of
Yes,
dollars to
right.
accommodate those two items, so.
All right, any other questions or comments for Justin?
All right, well, thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Have a good day.
We'll see you again. All right,
Where do you need to start?
We can throw on the presentation and say it's pretty much the same as the last time I was here to talk about it, but these are just the final confirmed numbers, even though most of them haven't changed much.
welcome, Jake.
Thank you, thank you. Yep, so Jake Shaughnessy with the Hubbard SWCD. I'm the plan coordinator, or one of the watershed coordinator for the district, but one of the plan coordinators for this plan. And so we're just, got the plan has been approved by the policy committee at their last meeting and whatnot, and then went through the public hearing process, and so we got, I think, somewhere around 25 or 30 comments, but only, through the public, participation part, we only had 4 people show up in person on the day of the public hearing, which, talking to about other watersheds, I guess that's fairly common. Most people get what they want written down, because it's a little easier to write it down and submit it than it is to describe it in your 3-minute time frame. So those were taken into consideration. They were decided upon by the board on what changes or updates needed to make. Quite a few of them were just grammatical and minor modifications like that. And then another big one, I think they went in and redid a lot of the tables, because there was tables that were sometimes changing, like the AIS table, and then impairment tables that they're just changing, where it just kind of referenced that there are impaired water bodies, or there are ones with AIS, but places to refer to them to find the updated data, because no one really wanted to have to go in there and update it every time a lake in the watershed this large might become impaired, come off an impairment, or have an AIS scare, or get added to another list. And so some updates to that kind of stuff in the appendix were made, just to make that easier for the plan to be correct. So I guess if you scroll down here, just kind of the overview of the watershed again, and say a big part with this watershed is the vast majority of it is in currently in forest or wetlands or open water. So a good focus of this watershed is on keeping what we have as clean as it is, and then helping maintain or improve some of the water bodies or the systems that are already impaired. You can go on to the next one. And here are just some of the major resources that you have there. And so there's it's a pretty dense lake with a lot of high quality stuff, from trout lakes, lakes of biological significance, to Cisco lakes, with some of our deep cold water lakes being up here in the glacial till area and what have you. So he just kind of goes over, it's pretty much the same information from last time, but just this is confirmed in the final.
So Jake, I don't know when to ask this question, so I'm just gonna ask it when I see this up. So, AIS it's been growing, slowly, but it's growing. The watershed, you guys don't do anything about that other than acknowledge it, right?
Yep, and in this plan, it's only acknowledged in there and saying, because this plan's for water quality and groundwater quality, and the AIS is kind of its own side program. So it's mentioned in here just because that's the one thing that most of our meetings, that's one of people's top concerns. And so
Yep.
it's mentioned in here just to note that it's a thought and that it's important, but yeah, it's not being directly addressed.
Okay.
And then, yeah, here's just a kind of an overview of the partnerships. These are all the county and SWCD boards that are joined in on, and they're still working with the White Earth Tribe, because they are looking to join to some sort of capacity, mainly on that, they have the tip of that straight river groundwater management area kind of creeps up to them, and so they have some groundwater concerns and some up there and some drinking water stuff, so they're looking to join in, but they might join in on they're still figuring out at what level they want to join in on. Go on to the next one, and then this is just kind of the community engagement, so the public kickoff events and the citizen advisory committee, and they've all met, and then along with that, they also had the the public hearing hosted that had a couple, or back in October, along with the public input period, so where people were able to submit a comment to myself or one of the Bowser staff that's leading it, or submit it through an online portal to get written information in there. And then this is just, the finalized priority issues and whatnot, so each of those little logos kind of represents, you'll kind of see those out throughout the plan. If you're looking around, you'll see these little logos tagging different aspects of the plan. So these are kind of the big 4 resources we're looking to work on. It's that soil, groundwater, surface water, and then that forest and habitat are kind of the 4 big resources. This one watershed, one plan is gonna be a little bit, or at least for this region, for the plans that we deal with, is gonna be very groundwater quality focused compared to a lot of the other ones. A lot of the other ones are fairly surface water and some agricultural focus, and we'll have a lot of groundwater focus in it, just due to a handful of the townships in the kind of in northern Wadena and southern Hubbard having elevated nitrate levels. So this one will have a high focus on that groundwater quality.
Is there gonna be any focus on the Beltane?
It's mentioned in the plan.
Yeah, but is there a plan to do anything with it other than mentioned, or it's just in, we'll see?
And say due to the statutes that this one watershed one plan was written as, it being they don't allow for outletting activities, and that's kind of what the Beltane crew
Yep.
has been interested in. So our office is working with them parallel to this plan,
Okay.
and it's mentioned in this plan as a priority water body, and so it's a priority water body and a priority resource, and it's a and the water level is called out as a local issue, but due to the statutes written for the funding and for these plans, we're unable to directly address it through these funds, but we are kind of working parallel to the plan with and through our office. And just these focus resource maps that just kind of shows that kind of that map on the left side, that's your groundwater map, and so kind of the darker the color, the more priority it is, and you can see that kind of that green hash marked overlay, that's that Straight River groundwater management area that the DNR has set up, and so you can see a big swath of that high priority is kind of right through our part of the county, or our part of the watershed, through the southern part of the county. So especially kind of, your Straight Lake all the way to east of Long Lake. And then we kind of combine all 3 of those maps into one priority area. So the dark green's the highest priority. So if you look at our part of the watershed, we got a fair bit of high priority. So a good chunk of the efforts would be going in and around the Park Rapids, Nevis, Akeley area, the lakes and the farms and the homesteads there. So, and here are just the official measurable goals. And so here's some of the goals for the first 10 year of the plan. And just one thing to make note, that the funding for this plan is to address as much as we can, but it's more than what could be addressed with these funds. And so that's expected to reach these goals. There's going to need to leverage other funding sources, but this also includes other agencies can report to this, because some of this stuff we don't really work, so some stuff DNR does, a lot of the habitat stuff, or some of the agricultural stuff that DNR or the USDA offices are working on, they'll also be reported to this. So it's not just a SWCD or county goal, it's kind of an encompassing goal for all the organizations working in this area, or in this field, so. And here's just some of the overall benefits, and so what we're looking to get out of the first 10 years of this plan. Then you have a little bit on the implementation, so we will be bringing coming to you guys another time later in the process, once the implementation agreements and the memorandum agreement starts to get moving. And say one thing that at the policy committee meetings has kind of been a large consensus, and no argument or discussion really at all, was that the group wants to do a memorandum agreement instead of a joint powers board. And it seemed like anyone was interested in a joint powers board, so it's just gonna be that memorandum agreement with a couple of offices doing the fiscal agents, being a fiscal agent, and then one being kind of a coordinator role, and then another one being like kind of 2 coordinator roles within the offices. So it's gonna be mainly just a collaborative effort with no new layers created. So it should be pretty simple, just like all the other ones we're working on in the county, so. Yeah, that's just kind of a table that Houston Engineering put together, the plan writers, and just kind of the existing funds and what's expected to be spent in the watershed, but that includes a variety of, that includes DNR, the county AIS, County Environmental Services, MPCA, Department of Health, Department of Ag, so it's kind of encompassing a whole lot of partners, but within this watershed, this is kind of what they're expecting to be spent per year, and then across the whole 10 years. And then you have just some of the highlights and say this watershed has some really good data, has some of the most updated data that has our new LiDAR data in there, and they did the PTM app, which is just kind of a model that helps us identify areas to protect groundwater resources and surface water resources. And so we had really good data to work off of that. And then yeah, this is got a new set of RAPS data from the MPCA. They just finished the first watershed that I've been in that has had 2 cycles of water quality data going into the plan. So this one came with a lot of good data, so we can really understand where to focus our efforts. And then this is just really the vision statement that was put together by the Citizen Advisory Committee and the PC, kind of put this together, and so this is kind of throughout the plan in a couple of spots. And then you have just the timeline of completion, so yeah, I guess we're in November now, and we're just pushing towards getting these out to the county and SWCD boards to send the plan to Bowser for approval. And so we'll be sending that plan once everyone gets on board, and say they're meeting in the beginning of January to approve it. So we'll try to get it all sent out before kind of the Christmas holidays hit, so they can get their review done and then approve it at their upcoming meeting. So I guess kind of the real reason we're here today is the resolution of support. So essentially, this is kind of canned language used in a bunch of other watersheds, and essentially to approve getting it sent to Bowser to review. And so every county board and SWCD board that signed into the policy committee at the beginning has to submit this for them to start reviewing it. Essentially, even though it's approved by the policy committee, they still want that consensus from the group saying that we all like what we're seeing and we're ready to send it off. And so I've added 2, one of them just a filled in version assuming what the language would be, because it's just essentially saying we're gonna submit this to Bowser, and then we're gonna approve it, adopt it, and replace the existing plan, the existing local water management plan, pending Bowser approval. And so that's kind of the big thing with the watershed. We're just looking to replace that that plan, so we aren't required to update it, but we can still manage and update it as we see fit. So the Bowser won't be coming around making us update it, but we can still use that document if we want it to be our guiding document for the county efforts, but we won't be required to have that document updated on their schedule. But if we do want to keep maintaining that local water management plan, we still can.
We still plan on doing that then?
That sounded like what the group had interested in, was with the watersheds to kind of have an overarching plan for the county to kind of guide our efforts within our borders of that, but we won't be required by statute to keep that up once we have all these one watershed, one plans in order. But we can still use them. That can still be kind of the first layer. You look at that one first, and then you look at the ones below, the plans below it for each watershed.
So are you asking us to put the resolution on our next board meeting agenda?
Yep, and so kind of the thought of coming here was just to get this in front of you in case there's anything in the language, because this doesn't need to be this exact language. It just needs to be essentially the 2 things we're looking for in here is that it's sent to Bowser, and then the other thing in here is that it's approved. You don't need to have it get approved or adopted pending Bowser approval, but people are just doing that so they just don't have to sign it a second time later in the process.
So I really wonder, Jake, if the word replaces is the right word to use in that paragraph.
Mm-hmm.
'Cause it makes it sound like the local water plan goes away.
Yeah, we can reword that how
A
you.
way of stating that,
Works alongside, what are you thinking?
it obviously, I don't even know if supersede's the right word, but if we're gonna continue to use the local water plan, I don't think you wanna say replace, because it makes it sound like the local water plan is going away.
Mm-hmm.
Where that actually is gonna be a good tool for us to use to solve the scope and maybe solve the Beltane issue. So I don't know that I want the local water plan to go away. That's where we'll deal with local issues.
Plus, if the local plan goes away, why would we need the SWCD? They have a valid place in the local issues. Yeah.
So you're basically kind of saying it would augment either or, whichever would be first
Yeah.
and second, so.
Or they work hand in hand,
It is qualified by saying for purposes of the area identified within this plan. So it's not superseding or replacing the water management plan in total. It's replacing it in this concentrated area where this is, and I'm not sure what the right language is, but it is,
So I'd like to
it
see
is
that
qualified.
paragraph adjusted somehow so it's more clear. You can come up with something before we approve it.
That's, I guess something that replaces the local water management plan for statutory requirements or something along those lines. I guess I'm not too sure what the language you would want on that would be, but,
We can discuss it.
okay.
Yeah, we can discuss it and we can identify
Yeah.
an opportunity.
Because the average person in the public's gonna read that and think the local water plan's going away. You wanna make it clear in that statement that the local water plan will still exist and be used, it just doesn't land into the scope of what the watershed's doing necessarily.
Right.
Tom, are you on this? Or you're not the alternate, you're the main
Yeah.
commissioner. Do you have any comments or anything you want to make?
No, that was a good suggestion on that, because, you know, we gotta deal with the Beltane issue, and that's a water issue, local water issue, yeah.
I guess I just have one question, or maybe it's more of a comment. In your measurable goals, you had quite a few items listed for different areas. And I'm just wondering, like, 2 miles of lakeshore riparian enhancement, and then the 10 barriers to connectivity enhancement. Do you have areas that you already have in mind to target to accomplish those goals? Or is it gonna be more, well, once the plan is approved and Bowser says, yes, go ahead, then you're just going to wait for public to come to ask for assistance with these things, or?
And say our programs are all voluntary, so there is quite a few. So we've been working with the partnership the last couple of weeks to kind of get the identify some of the funding, to get like a funding and implementation document ready for the policy committee. But there's quite a bit that's already kind of in the works that people know that they just don't have funding for, that this would fund it. But since it's all voluntary, a lot of it is people coming to us, and so there's nothing in this plan that we can go and say you need to do this. And so there is a lot of folks who are waiting for funding who want to do something already, and then there will be a good chunk of people having to find people to get the word out that, hey, there is this funding available to address these concerns in these areas. And if you look at the implementation table in the full plan, it breaks it down into 4 different focus areas. And so we have like the planning regions, I believe it's called in the plan. And so we're our county's part of 2 planning regions, so it's kind of split up, and the goals are kind of broken up into those planning regions as well. So each planning region has their own kind of set of goals, but this is just the kind of total.
But I guess you don't have anything specifically targeted to accomplish 2 miles of riparian enhancement.
No,
We don't have something waiting in the wings besides the people that have already come and said, hey, I've got this, I want to improve it, but there's no funding. So,
Yep, and say with it being a volunteer program, that's not, the whole 2 miles isn't already set up, and so there is some set up, but not the whole 2 miles.
Okay.
But there is focus areas, and so I think the typical Bowser language, they want at minimum 70% of their funds going into the high priority areas listed in the plans. And so that's kind of your 2 darker tiers, and then that other 30% can fall on good projects that might fall outside of that priority.
But Jake, maybe to clarify Commissioner Carradon's question, if you look at the connectivity enhancement, you're aware of at least 10 barriers to fish passage.
Yep, there's like the.
So you're aware, they're not slated for projects, but
Yep.
the's at least that opportunity.
they've identified them.
Yep, the DNR came to us with a fish passage, or like their culvert inventory, so they've got a couple of small dams that they're looking to update, and then some problem culverts, and so the DNR assisted on that aspect.
So going along with Steve's question, I had a question on the eggland. So are you gonna contact whoever is doing the production in there to see if they want to volunteer? Or are you just gonna wait for them to come to you if they're interested?
Yeah, so typically it's kind of a lot of them are incentive-based programs where, because, you know, a good chunk of this stuff is, we're not going in there really changing their land, not reducing how much they're farming. It's just adding additional practices on there to reduce how much, water they need to use, or how much nitrates leaching through, or capture sediment and whatnot. And so a lot of it's an incentive payment, and then there's like a an outreach program, and quite a few of the offices that are part of this have pretty well-built outreach programs, but our office is still building ours. 'Cause we haven't quite had the funding to really hit agriculture very much in the past.
After attending the field trip with soil and water, so would there possible use in this case for agriculture be grants available to farmers to do technology upgrades, to do
Yep.
exactly what you?
And say there is one that's been going on that's kind of been a parallel grant that has already started like about 2 years ago, where they're updating a lot of the irrigating systems. It's a cost share, so they can kind of update the irrigation system with low flow and precision systems, which allows them to reduce how much water they're spraying on there, and they can use it when they need it, and then that kind of stops a lot of that nitrate from getting washed away and washed in, and so that saves water from being used and saves them money from their having to spend so much on excess fertilizers, and then it has a water quality benefit. I'd say a good chunk of it will be things like cover crops or no-till drilling, where essentially the whole goal is to keep that soil healthier, to keep moisture in the soil, and then with all that stuff in there, it doesn't let nitrate filter out as much, so a lot of stuff you're putting on top of the soil is staying there a bit better, so.
Yeah, there's significant, I think I mentioned it to the board before, but there's significant technology improvements that help with how much water you have to put on your field, even in just portions of the field. Might get too much water, and you can have the irrigator literally, with technology, determine as it goes by that spot to not water it, and then move on and water the rest of the field.
Yeah, there's some good programs with that, and then even with, they can attach them straight to weather data. There's a couple organizations in the area that put out weather maps weekly, and that can really kind of influence how some of these modern systems are watering. If they're expecting to get water in 2 days, they won't run, so we got quite a bit of opportunities to, make it work with the producer. And yeah, the goal with all these stuff is to improve the water quality without minimizing the impact on the actual producer itself. And so that's why most of them are incentive payments, and then they don't really change too much of their operation of what they're actually producing, just how they're managing the land, typically when it's not in production. So in between, so putting a cover crop on, or when you put the seed in, doing a no-till drill just to keep that soil health there.
Same thing with disease control too and stuff.
Under land protection, are you looking to add 23,800 acres for protection, or I know some people have given up permanent easements, et cetera. Are you adding those into the total, or?
Yeah, and so anything that's been done since the numbers were ran will be added in, but a good chunk of this will be what's known as SFIA, and so that's essentially like a forestry landowner. Essentially, they work with it's actually the Revenue Service now, used to be the DNR, and they 8, 20, or 50 years that they say they're not gonna develop their land, and then they get a per acre payment on that.
Okay.
So that's gonna be the vast majority of that acreage, but there will be easements across the watershed. I expect that'll fall under here, but to get that acreage, that much acreage, the majority will be that SFIA, that temporary plan, but that doesn't make it, that SFIA doesn't make the land public or anything. It just, they kind of temporarily waive their right to modify the land, essentially,
To implement 2 miles of lakeshore enhancement, have you already identified some areas that you'd like to see that implemented on?
Yeah, so we've got a good chain of lakes, like the Crow Wing chain's gonna be a big one, because most of that whole area's priority, and then the Beltane's got a couple of folks on there who wanna do some work, especially with the water table moving so much there. They wanna kinda stabilize and make sure their shoreline is stable, and so there's a good chunk of folks around. And we've already got some people lined up looking at these funds, but once these funds are available, we'll really up our outreach to these areas.
What does an enhancement look like?
And so typically, there's kind of 2 ways that they typically work. Either it's just taking a lawn that goes straight up to the water and then kind of increasing that buffer, or if they're having actual erosion, it will be to kind of recontour and stabilize that shoreline and get a stable shoreline put in. So typically it's either adding a buffer or restoring it from a highly eroded state.
And the 500 forest management plans is, so that's going to be private landowners, and
Yep, and
So will Forester, funded by, the Crow-Wing watershed, go and help with the landowner
Yep, and so
in
yeah,
developing a plan?
they can get cost share for a forest management plan, which they can get into that SFIA program. That is one of the requirements. We can get cost share for the plan itself, even if they don't end up in that program themselves. That essentially can go in there, have a private forester come in there, give them an idea of what they have on their land, and then what the ages and all that stuff is. Especially for a lot of this, people just want to know, when should I cut and what should I cut? Because no one really wants to have their trees age out and then fall over, become too useful then. So that's kind of one of the big ones. And so this SFIA and these management plans don't stop the landowner from being able to manage it and keep cutting it or thinning it or harvesting off of it. It's just that they have to follow that management plan. So if that's one of their goals, they can set as their management goal is to produce lumber, and then that can be part of their management plan.
When does the memorandum of agreement, when is that?
And so they're working on that right now, and so we expect to have it sent out to the policy committee just to start looking at later this week or early next, to start looking at that. But we want to kind of get a consensus on it before it comes over for signature, because we don't really want it to end up at one of our 13 entities, for them to reject it and want a rewrite, because then we'd have to come back to every board.
So we got a policy committee meeting coming up then for this, or how are you gonna do that?
I believe they're gonna, the decision should be made sometime this month. I believe, it looks like it's probably gonna be that same date, but in January.
Oh, no.
Like the typical date, but in January is most likely the date it's gonna be used.
Okay, well, right now I don't have anything on my calendar for a policy committee meeting.
Yep, and say the date hasn't been chosen, but
Okay.
it'll most likely be the fourth Wednesday of January is most likely the date.
Okay, all right,
But we will be, when that's decided upon, we'll be sending out
okay.
information to everyone.
All right.
But most likely it'll be that fourth Wednesday of January. I guess, kind of the main goal here was just, update you on the plan, and then, the plan is public, and so if you go to our website or the planning page, you can get there and you can download the whole plan that's going to Bowser, and take a look at that, or the appendices, and then just to get that resolution. And so I guess I'll be available if you guys have any questions on that resolution, how you guys want to reword it, but just, the goal is to have that brought back to the meeting next week for approval, so we can get that sent into Bowser and kind of get closer to being able to implement some of these projects.
All right, thank you, Jake. Derek?
Good morning. How is everybody?
Morning. So for the public, we're just waiting. Jeff stepped out for just a little bit, and we will wait till he comes back and then start our business again.
So we'll talk about that resolution. Okay.
All right, Derek.
All right. Jeff, the other documents that I had sent you, had you pass those out to the board? Or should,
I don't believe so. Do
Okay.
you-
I have a couple of the handouts, so.
Okay. Perfect.
All right. Good morning. I appreciate the opportunity to share an update on the Heartland Lakes destination marketing program that we've discussed a couple of times. I know a lot of this information is repeat from past discussions that we've had, and so I won't buzz through a few of these slides fairly quickly, but I just want to kind of provide an update. The Chamber Board felt like we have completed what we're able to accomplish in terms of the research and exploration of a countywide lodging tax, and ultimately comes down to this group or the county board evaluating that and determining whether it's the right thing for our area. So just to provide a few updates, we'll go through this. Again, the goal here is sustainable, coordinated, and competitive destination marketing. We do have current funding sources. We are coordinated in some ways. However, we are certainly not all three of these things. And largely, the big discrepancy is on the competitive side. And the handout that I showed you shares a little bit, and as well as a couple of pieces later in the slideshow. If we go on to the next section, the big picture, really what we're looking to do is to enhance the shoulder in the off seasons from a tourism standpoint. By increasing our destination marketing and targeting those specific seasons, which will then in fact have a domino effect in terms of supporting the year-round economy and overall economic prosperity for our area. Going on to the next one, quick review of kind of where we've been. So I took a look at this. This has been a 20-month process that we've been undergoing, starting with an initial steering committee and then ongoing discussions internally, externally with lodging properties throughout Hubbard County, chamber members who are lodging properties, as well as some of our membership that are currently in Becker County. We've done a variety of different things in terms of email communication, phone calls, one-on-one, in-person roundtable discussions, and updates throughout the process. So we've really tried our best to communicate well. Obviously with communication, some of that's in the eye of the beholder, because I'm sure somebody out there was missed or felt like we're not perfect, but we certainly did everything we could to communicate with everyone that would be affected. And then over the last few months, we've actually done a fair amount of just communicating with some broader community groups, communication with Downtown Business Association in Park Rapids. I gave a presentation to the Nevis Civic and Commerce, arts groups, Rotary, et cetera, just trying to be out in the public and providing updates and sharing information on some of the things that we've been researching, some of the things we found, et cetera.
Derek, if I could just insert something for the public. Every commissioner was involved in the roundtable discussions when you had different groups and property owners come in, resort owners. And so that was beneficial for all of us to hear.
Yeah, and we certainly appreciated your guys' engagement in that. To have all 5 commissioners participate in one of those is super insightful because I think it gave you a firsthand account of what some of the feedback is, some of the challenges, some of the positives, et cetera. Going on, a quick snapshot of the impact of leisure and hospitality or tourism in our area. So you look at that is, so leisure and hospitality is accommodations or lodging, food and beverage sales, as well as art, entertainment, and recreation. So if you compile those, tax codes, so to speak, that's the gross sales in terms of impact in Hubbard County, and the job count 827. That would be the third largest industry from total jobs in our area. So I think everyone's pretty aware that tourism is a huge part of our economy, but some of those data points just reinforce the significance of our impact. Also like to point out that some of the data that we've gotten from Explore Minnesota, at our peak, we're at 775,000 monthly visitor days. That is basically only July. And then for about 6 months of the year, we're around 150 to 175,000 monthly visitor days. So essentially from, and there's a table a little bit later that you can see from November through April, we're at about 150 to 175. So that just speaks to the seasonality of our current tourism. Average growth rates, I know you guys have seen this before. However, just a quick reminder that this table showcases our sales per property over a 16-year time span. Okay, so we tried to, there's a large discrepancy in terms of sizes of properties and actual sales and things like that, as well as, the number of properties in each county changes. However, when you do sales per property, it accounts for a lot of that. And this is all Department of Revenue data. And you can see, very clearly that both for resorts as well as all lodging, which then incorporates hotel, motel, bed and breakfast, campgrounds, etc. It does not include short-term rentals, I believe. But it shows just the discrepancy in terms of those growth rates over an extended period of time.
Eric, do you know what the direct correlation is between us and the others? Are their shoulder seasons better? What is it that is causing us to lag our peers?
I would say it probably depends a little bit on the county. For some of them, they have strengthened their shoulder in the off season. For some of them, it maybe buoyed largely based on price increases. So it depends a little bit in terms of the demand and the seasonality of them. So that's a little bit challenging. But I would say, some of the, for instance, Beltrami County, I'll just use that as an example. A big portion of their growth is they now have some, multiple conference, and you know what I mean? Like the Sanford Center, and there's a hotel with a conference center, and so like their ability to host various events throughout the course of the season has definitely increased during that time period, and so that's part of their capacity growth, right? So everyone's a little bit different. Everyone has their own story. However, when you start and so Lake of the Woods is a good example in the sense of they've had significant growth in both the summer season as well as the off season, as they've done a really good job of creating a really strong marketing campaign around being the walleye capital of the world, and that's something that they've developed an identity and they've marketed it really well. Going on to the next one. So this showcases, and the kind of that line that starts high around the 80 point and goes down to 38 there is Hubbard County. It's a dark maroon line, and you can just see visually a little bit of how the resort landscape has changed through some of these counties in northern Minnesota. Hubbard County has experienced both the largest drop in terms of actual number of resorts. So you can see there we dropped by 42 properties, but we've also had the largest percentage decline. So relative to, and I think many know that, the resort landscape has experienced decline in general. However, we've seen the worst decline in Minnesota within Hubbard County. And there's a variety of reasons that go into that. Many times it's different by property. However, it is concerning that we're experiencing the worst of everyone. And we definitely need to address that in some capacity. As we go to the next piece.
Derek, I got a question for you. So when I look here at Cook County, they went from 37 to 33. And then if you go back, you figure out where they are in relation to Lake of the Woods. So have they kind of maintained the resorts through sales, or have resorts gone out of business and people started up new in different locations? Do you know anything about that?
In Cook County, they've,
Oh, yeah, you would know that.
yeah, the resorts have all, in the 10 years that I've been familiar with Cook County, most of the resorts have transitioned to new ownership.
And they've stayed resorts
stayed
instead of
resorts,
private?
yes.
Okay.
And they're,
Did they,
To some
was that
extent,
part of
they're-
a goal, a spoken goal, or is it just how it happened?
it's kind of how it happened, and they're slightly different than here, right? I mean, some of the resorts like Lutsen and Bluefin Bay and some of those really big ones
Yep.
transitioned to management companies, whereas here we had a lot of mom and pop resorts where you had a cabin, you had an owner's cabin and you had 6 or 8 other cabins. And typically what has happened with those is those have been sold off privately. And it'd be really hard to sell off Lutsen
Yes.
privately. It goes to an ownership group. But Gunflint Lodge, most of the ones up the trail, the Gunflint Trail that I'm aware of have all transitioned new ownership in the last 10 years, and they've either gone to a younger generation in the family, or they've gone to somebody who intended to move to the proximity of the Boundary Waters and operate a resort.
Okay.
So they've maintained because there's really no other use for them, and there's a demand for them in the condition that they are. Whereas here, the demand is for private ownership of Lakeshore, and that's kind of eaten up these 34 or 40 properties.
And my guess with both of those things is, I mean, you look at Lake of the Woods, Cook County, St. Louis County, they tend, at least at this moment, to seem to have a more robust winter economy than we do. Why that is, I think part of that is marketing. We don't have the dollars to market. We have in my opinion, the best snowmobiling in the state of Minnesota, bar none. But you gotta market it. You gotta tell people about it. Where you look at the marketing done from those other counties, they're constantly marketing Lutsen and their snowmobiling and ice fishing, and we just get lost because we don't have the dollars.
Yeah, the awareness piece of it is huge. It's critical, right? And and every one of them have had a little bit different strategy. Speaking to the Cook County piece, they've done very event focused, right? They've taken their county lodging tax dollars and they've applied it toward events within the winter, participation based events, and they've been really successful at it. But having the resources to promote those things make a big difference, and I mean that's the core of our discussion here, right? So so this is another table. It's a little bit overwhelming, but the first section there, you can see the drop in the resorts and the drop in the overall properties. So we've actually seen growth in terms of campgrounds and some of those other things over that time period. The drop in resorts does not is not the same significant drop in terms of total overall properties. So we've been able to retain a little bit in terms of lodging options, but it's definitely changed how they're appearing. If you look at those the sales lines and the differences, from a resort standpoint, we're one of only 3 counties in Minnesota that had a negative change over a 16-year period in terms of total sales. And largely that, obviously is we've just dropped so much in the count that you can't possibly have enough from the properties that are continuing to operate. And then the other piece that I wanted to call attention to is the average annual growth rate over, if you extend, so one of the previous slides that show the growth rate went through 2019, okay? And then those were around 2%, okay? The resort and lodging were right around 2%, give or take a little bit, if you go back to that slide, right? So one's just under 2, one's just over 2. Now, so if you add, so that was through 2019. If you add in 2020, 2021, and 2022, we are basically the only county, I think we're one of 2 counties that had growth in 2020 and 2021. And it was the 2 best years of growth over a 18-year period for our county. And if you look at it and you think the Enbridge impact, there was no place for anyone to stay around here due to the number of workers and the longevity. Now, and I like to call attention to that because I think it's important to recognize that there is, it showcases that we have capacity to grow, right? There are places for people to stay, but unfortunately, we've now seen some of that come back to earth, where we've had we don't have the data yet, but I would, based on anecdotal reports, I would suspect we were flat or declining in 22 and 23 for resorts. Again, that's just based on anecdotal reports of people who, despite rate increases to keep up with inflation, we've just had more openings, okay? And 2020 and 21 were career years for most of our lodging owners, as well as dining and retail and we benefit a ton, and that's because everywhere was full, and with some longer term stays and things like that through Enbridge, in a time of year where most of the rest of the state was in decline due to a pandemic. So it's just some interesting data points. I have a full spreadsheet outlining all this data, including all of the years in between. This is just meant to showcase some trends, but if there's ever any question, I'd be glad to share that with everyone. Going on, the lodging tax revenue component shows kind of what where we're at today in terms of the current, what we're projecting with that a countywide lodging tax would produce in terms of revenue. Our expectation is that it'd be somewhere in the 350 to 400,000 based on current sales numbers. It's a little bit of a projection in the sense of sales tax out of the Department of Revenue includes campgrounds. We don't know what percentage that is. And the majority of campgrounds would not collect lodging tax because it's for brick and mortar facilities only. So you would lose that revenue, but then you would gain the short-term rental revenue. So in terms of how those two things shake out, it's a little bit of a guess, but it's intended to give you a ballpark in terms of, to Dave's earlier point, this would kind of get us in the game and in the same realm of some of these other destinations in northern Minnesota, whereas right now we're quite a ways behind, as you can see here. So
I would add quite a ways behind with really no way to add additional income. Unless we look at this option.
Correct. Yeah, we have we've explored a number of different opportunities to develop Tom was probably around when they explored the tourism marketing partnership, which was essentially a voluntary lodging tax or surcharge, and there was significant participation for a period of time, and then it trailed off pretty significantly and sharply once people realized, why am I contributing when not everyone is? And I think there may also have been some other disagreements in terms of how it was spent or things like that. Obviously that was, I think the strength of that program was between 2003 and 2008. And at one point it was a pretty significant revenue generator, but then it was imperfect in the sense that there was no guarantees. And since that, in terms of the funding source, there was a time when the chamber was the primary funding source for the all of the destination marketing for the area based on the contributions and support of local resorts. We've now reached a point where our city lodging tax, which is primarily funded by 3 major hotels, has the capacity to do much more than the chamber does because we're a fee-based organization, nonprofit, with limited opportunities, relatively speaking, to produce that type of revenue. When you start talking about, needing to add $300,000 to a budget to be competitive from a destination marketing standpoint, they're just, and it's not just us, but around the state, lodging tax dollars are what is used to fund destination marketing. That is the tool that our state legislature has given communities to attract visitors, and it's essentially the only tool or primary, I wouldn't say only, but the only major contributor and certainly the primary source statewide.
So if I went downtown and surveyed all the businesses and stuff and asked them the question of whether the CVB has had a positive impact on downtown Park Rapids, what would their response be?
I can tell you, would we discuss this with the Downtown Business Association, they were extremely supportive and believe it is significantly in need. They believe that the marketing that we've done to this point is valuable. However, we have significant opportunities for growth. And their comment, they were willing to submit a letter of support for this because they know that we have such significant opportunity for growth, especially in the shoulder seasons. So they're very, very supportive of this concept because they've seen the impact of what's been done to this point in terms of building the summer season, and believe that we have significant opportunity to grow beyond that.
One comment I'll make. So I have meetings in Alexandria. We all go to Bemidji, and then Detroit Lakes I just drive through as I go places, but I stop there because All three of those places have built their downtown up significantly. And Alexandria down, they have huge projects going on. And if you look at Main Street of Detroit Lakes and how that has changed just in the last 3 years. And so I'm guessing that's attributed to people coming in, because all of us, when we live in a community, we only spend so many dollars, because it's just, how much do you need? And we have a wonderful downtown, but to keep it, we need to continually bring in people that are willing to spend.
And how do you help market the outlying areas like the Nevises and the Dorsets and the Akelys and the Laportes and the Lake Georges, when there's limited amount of dollars right now that we can't even cover Park Rapids very well, you know? It's made an impact, but if you're going to cover the rest of the county, you gotta have significant more revenue to even make an impact.
Yeah, and I think the key on that is we're rarely targeting one specific community, so to speak, but we're very much focused on the destination and the things that we have to offer, right? So when we're promoting ATV or off-road vehicles, and we invest pretty significantly in that area from a niche marketing standpoint, it's a broad benefit scope, right? And that's kind of our approach already, is because we do represent the Heart and Lakes in so many ways, and we know that there's opportunity for properties from down towards Monaga all the way up towards Lake George to benefit when you can do it based on that, when you can market based on the lake experience and off-road vehicles and visiting Itasca and all of these different things that have that broad base. That's very much our focus. But you're absolutely right. When the pie is small to start with, the more you cut it up, the less farther it goes, which is certainly a challenge. Just go through we got a couple more slides here. I think so. This is a number, $4.5 million. This is based on the 290,000, or roughly 290. I think it's 300,000 in terms of marketing or additional destination marketing would generate $4.5 million. Because according to Explore Minnesota, their return on investment is about $25 per dollar invested in destination marketing. So pretty significant marketing impact. If you go down to this next slide here, this is, I mentioned the monthly volume by visitor days. So this is where you can kind of see that from November through April, we're less than 200,000. And then you have this huge peak in July, but even June and August show significant opportunity for growth. And essentially what that is, that it showcases, we're hearing more and more from our lodging properties that we have a shrinking summer season because our primary market is families, and families are getting more busy based on activities later into June and earlier in August. And it's eating away at the tourism season. I know that's been a priority. Keeping school starts until September has been a priority for the resort associations for years. And a huge reason for that is, as soon as the earlier kids start sports in August or school, that people stop going on vacations, and you can see some of that impact within this graph. Now, the key is that with additional funds, you have ability to address additional markets, right? So right now we have a really strong family demographic that comes to visit our area. However, there's a lot more people that we could attract if we have the funds to go out there and approach different demographics and kind of build on some of that. So that shows some of the potential in some of the shoulder and off seasons that we think we can attack with additional funding. The next slide shows a little bit of that domino effect of economic development. And there's a lot of research being done on this, with the idea that if you advertise and people see your advertisements for a destination and they visit, you start to see significantly increased appetite to move to a location, to start businesses in a location, to retire to a location, etc. And this just, shows a little bit of the data that's been done within Minnesota. But when people visit, they're just that much more likely to, want to invest some part of their life here. And so that's where kind of that domino effect of economic development has, and the tie between tourism and economic development. One of the things that is new is we did bring in a consultant to provide suggestions or recommendations from a marketing in terms of how the funds could be used. Okay, so you'll see here, there's the current is our current marketing budget, or kind of some rough estimates in terms of the dollars spent in different categories as well as percentage. The Boundless projection, that is our consultant, which was named Boundless Collective, gave some recommendations in terms of total amounts and percentages based on industry norms. And the total of 290,000, so you may be wondering, 350 to 400,000 is the total revenue. Why is this only at 290? And the reality is that there is overhead admin staff costs to implementing this. Most visitor bureaus plan for between 30 and 50% for overhead. We believe that with the structure that we have in mind in terms of a cooperative chamber visitor bureau type of concept, that we would be able to keep that significantly lower at more of like a 25 to 30% to maximize those resources. So that's where that 290 total budget would come in, but it just shows some of the changes and impact in terms of the funding that we would have, and significant increases in a lot of areas.
Yeah, look at the digital, social, and video, look at the,
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, it's game changing, right? So, that's something like our current visitor guide, which is the discovery guide here, represents the community really well. We produce a high number, and is a valuable tool. But the reality is as if we have additional funding, like we don't have to spend any additional in that area. So it eats up such a huge percentage of our budget now. That stays the same, and everything else just opens up such significantly for us to have additional impact. So, pretty powerful, I think, to see the changes, and I think one of the things that the Boundless Collective kind of confirmed in terms of messaging is beyond just the budget and some recommendations, but just that this would get us in the game. She works with a lot of different individual properties as well as different tourism entities, and she kind of reaffirmed that this type of a budget change would make us significantly more competitive, and that her comments were that we would absolutely benefit and see a difference in terms of our visitation and awareness of our community. So it's always good to have some outside voices that are industry experts, so to speak, and we did we offered everyone to come and listen to her present. She gave some updates. We had relatively low attendance, unfortunately. However, again, just trying to provide communication on what some of the potential and possibilities are. Going to the next one, feedback, and again, commissioners, you heard some of this from our roundtable discussions, but I just wanted to revisit some of these things throughout our feedback and engagement process. The things that we've heard early on the steering committee, really, the Heartland Lakes brand, people identify with. They don't want to hear Park Rapids or Nevis or things like that, right? There's this brand that people that was developed a number of years ago that people really appreciate and identify with, and there's a strong desire that we maximize our efficiency. There isn't anything that we could do that will change the fact that we're a relatively small community, so we need to be great stewards of our funds and use them to the best that we can. Even with additional funding, people wanted to make sure that we're maximizing those resources. As we got feedback from lodging property, the two things that came up the most frequently were the cost to our guests. People are concerned that with the rise of inflation already, adding 3%, that it will scare people away, and that they have people that have been coming forever that they might lose. For many of our resort properties in particular, There's deep relationships with people, and they really value that. And so, passing on that additional cost, even if the business does not have to pay any of it and it's all on the guest, that was a pretty significant concern. And then the other piece was why lodging. And I know this group is very familiar with how taxes and sales taxes and things like that work. Lodging tax is the option our legislature has given us, and sales taxes are not feasible for a number of reasons in terms of this type of investment. But within the lodging community in particular, it was like a why just us feeling, and I think that's pretty understandable. From those that are really passionate about this, the two things that I always hear come up is the recognition that we have such an opportunity for growth, and that especially within the shoulder seasons, we have a desirable destination, and we have opportunity to grow, and we just need to take advantage of it. And then the other thing is, I've heard a number of people, including some of my board members, say that what we're talking about here isn't just a tax or marketing. We're talking about the long-term viability of our community. And if we want to continue to attract people to our area, not just to visit, but to eventually come and live here and work here and start businesses here, this is a critical component. And right now we're not competitive or as competitive as we could be. And it's something that we really need to be looking at. So that kind of goes through some of the data and feedback that we've done. Wanted to share kind of a couple of recommendations or requests, and that is, our board would like to recommend that we proceed with a 3% countywide lodging tax. We think it's critical to that the funding goes to promoting the Heart and Lakes destination. One of the requests of and feedback pieces that we got is to explore a sunset clause. There was a lot of desire or discussion around some sort of phased implementation or sunset clause. I think there's anytime there's something new like this and there's a significant pot of money, people want to make sure it's being used appropriately and that it's having the intended impact. And a sunset clause would be a way to do that. However, a 12-year, we want to make sure there's enough of a window to truly evaluate the impact of something like this. So that was one of those things is something to look at. And again, that's based on feedback that we've gotten. Is there's a strong desire from the lodging community to do something like that. And then the last thing here, Department of Revenue collections. Anytime a lodging tax is implemented, the authority has the ability to do the collections. So right now, the city of Park Rapids does the collections for our city lodging tax. So the county, if this was passed, the county would have the option to do that and keep up to 5% for administrative purposes to cover any costs, staff-wise, et cetera, for that collection process. However, anytime you're doing a large-scale collection from short-term rentals, going through the Minnesota Department of Revenue has significant advantages, and because the Department of Revenue has established relationships with those providers like Airbnb and VRBO, where those taxes would be collected automatically and passed along versus, for instance, a county staff person trying to track down short-term rentals operators and getting them to collect that. And we've also heard from several properties that going through the revenue, who they already pay sales tax and things like that, would be easier from a business owner perspective. So, and then we had there's a couple of considerations to keep in mind. Again, this driven largely by some of the feedback we've received. There are some properties that don't identify with Heart and Lakes, and in particular, we know that there's a property in Eastern Akeley that is located on Leech Lake and is currently contributing 3% lodging tax to the Leech Lake Tourism Bureau voluntarily. And then there's definitely some properties in the northern part of Hubbard County that identify with Bemidji much more than they do with the southern 2/3 of our county and the Heart and Lakes area. So that's obviously going to be a key consideration. I know all of you are very much aware in terms of county boundaries don't always follow exactly the the reality of how we live our day-to-day lives, and that's a challenge that I know you guys consider on a regular basis, but it is a key piece of feedback that we received. I also wanted to address the implementation date and timeline as you think about if this is something that we want to implement. It's important to understand that for many of our resort properties, they would be collecting, or they've already collected a deposit, sometimes a 50% amount of money for this summer. And they've already given people their bill or the expectation of their bill a year in advance, right? And so when we start to think about a timeline from the implementation and making it reasonable for some of our properties to adhere to that, we just want to be cognizant of the impact and how far out they're booking some of these places. It really is a year in advance for most of them. So, and then lastly, I guess a question would be what type of reporting expectations would be put in place for that marketing entity. I think it's going to be very important. I think there's a lot of curiosity in terms of the impact that this could have, and I think it'll be critical that there is, if implemented, that there's consistent communication both to the county but also to the those that are contributing to make sure there's a lot of transparency. And then lastly, just so that everyone's aware in terms of, next steps, if this was implemented, some of the big things, we just touched a little bit on the implementation timeline, but there would need to be significant communication with properties and some explanation on how the tax would be collected and things like that. There's going to be some hurdles, and we would need to do some trainings and things like that. We would also need to address something like organization structure. I referenced the efficiency and how we think we can work together. The Chamber and the Park Rapids Convention and Visitor Bureau are having ongoing discussions about the possibility of developing a merged entity where we would have one single entity with two separate business units, for destination marketing and then for the chamber business side of it. But that would obviously take a significant amount of groundwork and would need to be finalized if it was implemented and chosen for the tax marketing piece of it. And then obviously starting to develop a strategy and being ready to implement it. That implementation piece, there's a lot of, even if the thumbs up is really kind of a starting point in many ways. So, and that concludes some of the things that I wanted to share and update everyone. And if there's additional questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
You said that the city of Park Rapids has a lodging tax in existence already?
That's correct.
Do you see that going away if this was to be implemented countywide?
Based on our interpretation of the statutes, this would supersede that. And I've had discussions with the city of Park Rapids. They're aware of the discussion, and if necessary, they would remove it, is my understanding. They're on board with that.
Okay, all right, thank you. And I do, after looking at this and thinking about it a little bit more, when you look at the chart, you look at how many have invested in a sales tax, less than or more than 3% sales tax, and then the increase in the growth that those counties have seen. It directly correlates to them spending more money on their advertising. I mean, it's clear. So I think it's a good deal. So we'll see where it goes from here.
So I have a question, when you were talking about the resorts and the reservations. So if we pass this and put the implementation timeline as of January 1st of 2026, then basically that puts you out till 2027 to have any additional funding for advertising, correct?
So if the collection started in '26, you would likely see a significant increase in funding in roughly August.
Okay,
And you would see campaigns being implemented for '27.
yeah, okay.
Is likely what a rough timeline in terms of how that would work.
So if I have made a reservation for 25 at a resort and we put the implementation timeline January 1st of 25, hypothetically, then the lodging facility would just have to let them know that whatever their bill is, it would be an additional 3% if that's what we pass, correct?
Or they would,
Or
they
the,
would pay it,
or they what?
or they would eat it.
They would eat it, yeah, I was
One
wondering
or the
about
other.
that too.
Would a September 2025 implementation date work? And they're through most of their bookings for the summer already.
You know, each property is a little bit different, so I got to be hesitant. I don't want to speak for everyone. The majority of those year in advance renewals would be completed by September 1st. Typically, these are implemented on a quarterly basis.
Yeah.
So it would likely be October 1, in which case, you know, I would say 75% of our resort properties have finished operations by the end of September. Most of them operate through September, but as soon as you start to get into October, many of them start to worry about freezing pipes, and are, you know, for a significant portion of them, they're wrapping up on September 30th. So October 1 would certainly be feasible in terms of ensuring that there's advance notice to our guests, because by that point, most of the people that would be visiting wouldn't have booked, so to speak.
And you would still have the previous year's CVB funding that you would be working to market the next year, but you could get theoretically a quarter or two bump under the new sales tax to bump that budget a little bit for the following year?
Yeah, it wouldn't, I mean, the reality is those that are operating from October 1 through the end of December is mostly fall under the current lodging tax, so you wouldn't see a significant difference in terms of funding. The primary difference in terms of funding is really from, you know, June through August.
So if the board decided they wanted to move forward with this, Jeff, is it just a matter of working up a resolution?
It is just a matter of working up a resolution pursuant to the special legislation that's in place for Hubbard County to do that. Counties don't have the authority to issue a countywide lodging tax, except in unorganized territories, aside from the fact that there's special legislation for Hubbard County to be able to do so. So we'd have to reference that, and we'd have to identify the starting dates, we'd have to identify who is gonna administer those funds for us, and I agree with Derek, having it go straight through the state is the easiest thing for us to do, and that means that 5%, $20,000 stays in their pot, and if we're not incurring costs, we don't need to take a portion of it, and then they get all of it. So, yes, that is my belief, is that we could enact that legislation that's been hanging out there for a while, and by resolution, establish that.
Does the board have any thoughts on?
I just have a brief question for Derek. Do you do most of your digital and social media marketing in-house? And do you anticipate that if a lodging tax is going to be implemented, that you would require extra time, extra staff to take care of those things? Do you think that demand would be increased that much?
Yes, we would certainly need additional staffing. As we're currently structured, we would not have the capacity to implement that level of a budget. However, and there would likely be some changes in terms of so right now our social media piece is completely in-house, other than, when we do some advertising pieces, we contract for placement, but it's a pretty small number. The digital media piece, most of the time when you pay for placements, they'll do some of the design on what those pieces are. But we do contract out for a lot of our ad design already. So as you place more ads, we would have to do a lot more, we would have some contract fees in terms of some of the design stuff, but there would certainly be some requirements for additional staffing in order to just manage the strategy and the implementation piece of this. And that's where you see the discrepancy between a $290,000 marketing budget and a potential revenue of $350,000, $375,000, somewhere like that. We're anticipating a 25-30% for staffing, overhead tax, all of those types of typical overhead business expenses, which is significantly below industry standards, but, obviously it still takes a piece of it.
Would you look at expanding staffing versus, just hiring in a marketing company, contracting with a marketing company? I don't know which one would be cheaper. You'd have to explore it, but obviously with a marketing company comes more expertise generally.
We would certainly have to evaluate that. That's a great question. We would have to put an RFP out, to see what sort of bids there would be for that. A lot of, that would be something for the group to evaluate for sure.
So going along with that, I was on the committee when we developed the Heartland Lakes. And there were local, and then there was this group out of Texas that, responded to the RFP. And I think most of us went in thinking one way, and then when we heard their presentation about how we had to do something fresh and different, we were on board to do something entirely different. And so I'm wondering, Dave, even with hiring versus bringing in a firm, they might have some fresh ideas that
Well, and they
weren't even considered.
Yeah.
It was really interesting to
have
me to have
experience
that.
beyond local
Yes.
to draw off of, and it could just be a regional firm that did it too. I mean, that has experience in the area and knows the area.
Yep.
Yeah, and I think, so the part that will be challenging as we evaluate that is you still need staff to help guide with that, the
Yep.
strategy, right? And so, that'll be an interesting balance that we'll have to strike, because we wouldn't have the capacity to do both. So essentially, or at least not at a high level. So you're gonna have to kind of look at whether you add a quality staff or if you contract out, and how those different pieces shake out. So that would definitely need to be evaluated. But at the very least, there would likely need to be some sort of contract out to get some additional ideas. Obviously Heartland Lakes is really, there's a lot of branding work done around that as a community brand, but it hasn't really been fully leveraged as a tourism brand, as a destination brand.
We ran out of funds, and we ran out of the ability to work with somebody.
So that would need to be a pretty key part of that. Part of that is, okay, so how do we take the community brand and take that one step further, and now further enhance that as a destination brand and bring it to life.
Would the board have consensus that Derek and Jeff could have conversation of exploring how to move forward? Possibly bring forward a sample resolution, or I don't know, what's the board thinking?
I know if I was a young new resort owner and I had a property that was large enough to expand on, and we had something like this in place, and I knew the demand was there, I'd start adding units.
Okay.
I think that'd be a great help for the area.
That would be a great benefit. I hadn't thought so much about the expansion of some of the current properties, but yeah, I mean, that would be a huge benefit to the whole area.
And that would be a discussion this board could have too, is taking a look at some of the hurdles that make it difficult for resorts to expand.
That's another thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like in my property, I could have added 2 more according to the current rules, but 8 acres of land, I mean, there's gotta be room to do more than just 2 more. That would've made, I had 11, that would've made 13. I would think I could've gotten as high as 15 and still have a lot of room.
That's right.
But
so
you
we-
gotta consider that kind of stuff.
You do, because if we want to expand those shoulder seasons and off seasons, there's a lot of these properties that are, 3 season only, if even that. How do we make it possible for them to make it 4 season when it's gonna probably require a footprint change on their cabin or something like that to make that happen because of the plumbing or whatever else it might be? We really have to be thoughtful about that and maybe have ESO look into how that would look, and it may entail some minor tweaks on the ordinances to be able to help spurn this and make this beneficial.
That, I know from a resort owner standpoint, that would be a very welcome conversation. They would certainly appreciate that. And, I think they have every desire to take care of their lakes and the shoreline and all of those things, because that's a critical part of what attracts people to their property. But they also need to stay viable as a business and find ways to grow, and having those conversations of, well, how can we, make sure that the environmental protections and the conservation pieces are intact, but also give them the ability to expand and grow and just, fix different cabins.
Yeah, so there's other pieces to this that are, they seem in, not so significant on the front of the book, but you dig into the pages and you go, all of a sudden, the resort owner runs into this hurdle. Well, what good does it do to market all this if this hurdle exists that they can't take advantage of what we're marketing?
So
What-
what would be
what's
your
your-
suggestion?
what's your
that we
time frame?
You should do. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, what's your time frame relative to this, to being able to have a conversation about, implementation timeline? When, we would need to, you would need to establish that before the board could consider it, because it'd be part of the resolution that we bring forward.
That's ultimately this group's decision, but yeah, if the, a January 1 of either a October 1 of 25 or a January 1 of 26 would give plenty of time to have the necessary conversations to educate, communicate, and support different properties in implementing this, as well as communicating with their guests. So from that aspect, those two dates that were referenced today, I think are both really quality options.
Yeah, and even from the standpoint of, some minor tweaks in the ordinance, we would have a whole nother year beyond that to address those issues. Before any marketing would be, any funds would be available to even start marketing it anyhow.
And, one question, Jeff, in terms of how public hearings work for the county, and, I know there is an interest from within the lodging properties and membership to participate, but maybe challenging to be here in person. Are there opportunities for people to, submit feedback via letter or, that sort of thing for a public hearing component? Just so that I have that answer.
Yeah, and honestly, I have to look, I do not believe there's a public hearing requirement in the legislation from 2005.
I don't believe there is either, from what I've read over time, but, that doesn't mean we couldn't if we chose to, or felt the need to.
Yeah, I think Jeff's correct. When the legislation states that you have the ability to implement it, then you do not need a public hearing. That's my take on it.
I would,
Maybe I must be thinking of the primary lodging tax statute and not the special legislation piece of it, because I thought there was a public hearing component within the standards, but maybe that is the standard piece of it, so.
I recall reading back when I first got on the board that there were two different ways they could have went when they passed it or asked for that special legislation in the first place, and the county chose the option that is exactly that Jeff said. It's set up to do it. That's why it would supersede the local Park Rapids
I have it on my
CBD.
desk.
And so it's not required based on the previous county board's direction they took when they asked for the special legislation.
So the one thing, we didn't all attend the same sessions when Derek hosted, the different resort and lodging property owners. And so we did hear a lot of the public comment during that time. I'm not sure we actually need a public hearing.
I have communicated that there would be one, but that is our error, and ultimately it's up to you guys' call on how you want to approach that. And we would just communicate that out to everybody that whatever the process is decided.
I think I would have been definitely in favor of one if we all hadn't participated in those discussion groups. But I can go either way if the board feels,
Oh, with public hearing and you give people a chance to at least vent their own thoughts, and they can't go and say, we just rammed it down our throats
Yeah,
without
that's
us
true
having
too.
any say in it.
And allow for written comments to be submitted ahead of time with a certain deadline that they have to be in.
yeah, and the board reads all those.
Mm-hmm.
We're given every one of them.
Yeah, there is no public hearing requirement. So that means it's elective for you. Yes, you're right. There is one in the statutory, but we're not following the statutory.
Because it's
Following
just
the
special
we're
legislation.
Following the special.
So we could decide if we want to have a
Right.
public hearing
Yeah.
session, no, well, public listening session, I should say, later on, because we've got plenty of time between now and the proposed implementation, so.
Yes and no.
Yeah, I was,
But coordinating with the state, if your intention is to do this, I would schedule it as soon as possible.
Yep.
So I would schedule it in December or January, and I recognize that that's the off-season, but if we put this off until May with an intent of starting in October or December, we may not get the state to be able to start it, so we push it down the road a whole year.
but the one thing good about off-season is hopefully then more resort and lodging property owners can attend or,
A significant portion of them are not here
Not local.
in the winter.
So they do leave.
So that's why I asked about the written comment.
Okay.
Is there,
There's always an
Yep.
option at
Yep.
that point.
I guess, I err on the side of, go ahead and do a public hearing, why not? It's, it costs the county a little more money for everybody to show up and stuff, but gives
So,
people a last opportunity to voice any concerns they might have.
so either next Tuesday or the first Tuesday in December, we can bring a proposed resolution and a timeline and ask you to consider setting a date for a public hearing. And if we do that let's just say it's not gonna happen next week. It's gonna happen the first week in December.
okay?
Which would mean the public hearing wouldn't be until, probably the second meeting in January. It wouldn't be at the organizational meeting, it'd be the second meeting in January. So you'd have the opportunity to have the public meeting and make the decision in January, and I think between then and October 1st, or then and January 1st, you would have the ability to work with the state to establish.
And December would not be a good time to hold the public hearing
No, but we
anyway,
we could
so-
set the date for that
Yeah.
and hold the public hearing that third Tuesday in January. But I could draft that resolution and reference the materials that we have, and you could set that date, and then you could see what feedback you get before you made a decision. But I think if you made a decision in January, we'd still have time to execute by third quarter, fourth quarter.
So would there be any advantage to an October 1st implementation date really then?
there would be some, yes, but not a significant one, because there are definitely properties outside of the city of Park Rapids that do operate in the winter. I think we have around 10 properties that have at least some of their cabins operating year-round. But like I said, it's most of the ones that do operate through the winter, it's in limited capacity. And so it wouldn't be a significant impact, so to speak.
And plus you'd capture the short-term rental
You would, yeah, absolutely.
opportunities as well, which there's a lot of them out there that operate year-round.
Very true.
Yeah, we did, and that's one thing, we didn't have a lot of comment on, in the discussion groups from that sector.
Well, the reason I ask that is, when we put together the resolution and things, do we go with an October 1st date, and then maybe that changes after the public hearing? Or do we just not even consider that and just go with the January 1?
Honestly, the answer to that question would probably come from a consultation with the Department of Revenue to find out what their horizon is to be able to do that.
Yeah.
Can they do it? Can they do it in 6 months and start it then, or is it is it more likely that it would be then? And from a standpoint of, is it better to start it earlier rather than later? That would be kind of your decision, but at least from a process, they could tell you how long it would take to enact.
So couldn't Jeff check on that and bring a sample resolution, and then we can go from there?
I could bring all that information, that first meeting in December.
Yep.
You can establish then a date for a public hearing and then move forward from there. I think if we set the date, we have to have the note, well, it's not required, it's the notification requirements are kind of out the window, but the notification practice is to have that notification out no less than 10 days and no more than 30 days before the hearing, which mean if we set the date first Tuesday in January, we're easily clear to have it on the first Tuesday in December, set the date, third Tuesday in January to hold the hearing.
And then that would give Derek ample time too, because you'll want to give notice.
Yes, we'll be communicating to the groups on our list to make sure that they're aware of what the process is.
Okay, board consensus, are we okay with that? Okay. All right, thank you, Derek.
Thank you.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I need to take a little break.
Okay, let's take a 5-minute break.
Yeah.
Are we back?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so the commissioner committee list, let's all take a look at that and give our changes to Denise. And then, it'll come before us again before January 1st, or at the January meeting is actually when we'll approve it, right?
Yep.
The
but
first
we'll-
meeting in January?
We'll provide updates as we have them.
Yep, okay.
And then hopefully when we get to the organizational meeting in January, there's just the few changes that need to happen as a
Okay.
result of the year
Okay.
changing.
I think there's one on the planning commission that,
Oh, yeah, because the person changed in my district.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, you gotta take one off and replace it with, yeah, Mark Peterson, there you go.
yep.
We'll do all of that housekeeping. Right now, we were just asking you to concentrate on your assignments.
Okay. And,
We haven't sent this to the department heads yet for review. We're just the first time to get it out for you to think about your assignments for this year and how they might change for next.
okay, any consideration of changes?
Yeah, I had a couple, the transportation, working with social services, I suggested Steve would be on that because it just fits his background and the committees he's currently on better. And then the other changes I was gonna talk to Denise about was just to put board chair and vice chair instead of names on just a few of them, like the labor negotiations. You and I are listed, but you were actually board chair and I was vice chair when we were on that committee.
No, I wasn't either one.
Weren't you board chair when we had
This
negotiations?
goes back a couple of years.
Okay,
So part of the consideration is the determination of how to populate those standing
Yeah.
committees.
Yeah, okay.
yeah, okay. Okay, do you want to do a letter of support?
Yeah, this was added, and the deadline came up, and generally, it's just a consensus thing that we would author a letter of support in favor of these applications for funding, and especially since this is, the third iteration of the same. It just shows that they've been successful at getting those funds from the state into our community for business redevelopment. So if there's not an objection, I guess we would just submit a letter of support.
And there was background information we had for, okay, board consensus, we're fine with that? Okay, all right, and then the attorney?
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody heard the news that our county attorney, Jonathan Frieden, passed away this weekend. We'd known he was ill for a long time, but this is sudden, and it was unexpected to happen this quickly. So everyone's concerned about the well-being of his family and concerned about the well-being of the people who he worked with and who work with him. And at the same point in time, this board has a responsibility, pursuant to county or state statutes, we have to have a named county attorney. And there's a process for that. The 37508 is a responsibility for the board to fill vacancies in county offices, and that's what I'll be working off of at this point. I don't think we're in a position to ask you to make any appointment to fill the balance of the term, but there is an administrative process whereby if I identify somebody as the chief deputy or first assistant, they can bridge the gap for us. I am having a meeting with the assistant county attorneys at noon today, reviewing what their expectations, plans, goals, hopes, thoughts are. I had a meeting with Kate Leesburg this morning, and I'll be meeting with her again after that. I am guessing that we are probably going to regionally advertise to see if there's anybody that's available, qualified, interested. We will have to fill the appointment for the balance of the term, which is now through December of 2026. That position is up for election again in November of 2026.
So I have a question, because if there was a vacancy here, because if it was over a year, there would have to be an election, but that doesn't apply to the county attorney?
It does not.
Okay,
Except,
yeah, or
because they're offices,
okay,
not officials.
Okay.
When a vacancy occurs in the office of the elected positions, the county board must fill by appointment at a regular or special meeting. The person appointed to a vacancy pursuant, et cetera, et cetera. If that vacancy happens less than 84 days before a primary preceding a general election, there's another
Okay,
goal for it. And then C section says when a vacancy occurs in the office that has a chief deputy or first assistant, that person may perform the duties, which means we can tell the court, we can tell the state, we've got somebody acting as county attorney. The term interim doesn't apply here, but that's exactly what it is, until that position is filled by appointment by the county board. So
okay.
I expect to be able to tell you by the end of the day who I'm going to identify out of the qualified people we have in that office who are going to act as county attorney, and the process that we're going to recommend that you consider to fill that appointment.
You'll send that out via email
I'll send
today?
that out via email this
Okay,
afternoon.
Thank you. All right.
And it will likely, I believe it's likely going to be that we post and search for a few weeks to see if there are interested people. As I understand, there are qualified people in the community in the area that might be interested. So, as difficult of a thing as that is administratively, there's a responsibility that we also have to take care of, so. I think everybody got the notice that the service or the visitation is Thursday at 2:00. I understand that Beltrami staff have offered to cover anything, so I believe our attorney's office is gonna be closed Thursday afternoon, and I'll work with them relative to the rest of. The one thing that I know is everybody in that office is gonna make sure that their responsibilities are taken care of. But they also know that they have peers in neighboring counties that they can use to help them now.
All right, thank you. Is there anything else before we adjourn?
Is the canvassing board today?
The canvassing board is at 1:00 this afternoon.
1 o'clock.
Okay.
I'll be there.
Nope.
I do not have anything for general government today. It would be to talk through a little bit more on this. But as we're getting past 11 o'clock, I really need to spend some time getting things ready for my meeting with the attorneys at noon.
All right, motion to adjourn?
So
Oh, we don't do a motion here, do we? Not even to adjourn, right?
Yeah, you can make a motion to adjourn.
Okay.
Somebody
Tom did.
has to announce that you're
Steve
adjourned.
seconds, okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries.